Being a part-time driver at night wasn't my dream job, but it paid the bills. The city had a different face after dark, quiet, eerie, and filled with people who didn't exist in the daylight. Some were harmless, just late-night workers or exhausted students heading home. Others, well, some passengers left me with a chill that never quite faded. One night, I picked up someone I wish I hadn't. It was a slow Tuesday night, and I was thinking about calling it quits when a ride request popped up. The pickup location was far, right on the outskirts of town, near an abandoned industrial zone. It was the kind of place where people didn't usually go at night. Too many empty lots, too much darkness. I hesitated, but the fare was higher than usual, almost double. Maybe someone was desperate to get home. I accepted and started driving. As I got closer, the area became unsettling. No streetlights, no passing cars, just silent warehouses, their windows broken and lifeless. The pin on my GPS led me to a small, cracked road, and at the very end of it, a figure stood waiting. He was tall and thin, wearing a dark coat that seemed too big for him. His hands were deep in his pockets, and he didn't move as I pulled up. I rolled down the window slightly. "You call for a ride?" The man nodded but said nothing. He opened the back door and slid in without a sound. I checked the app. The drop-off point was even further out, past the city limits into a rural area I wasn't familiar with. A bad feeling crept up my spine, but I ignored it. "Long way out," I said, trying to make conversation. Silence. I glanced at the mirror. He sat stiffly, hands still in his coat pockets, staring straight ahead. His face was obscured by the shadows, but something about his posture felt wrong. I turned my eyes back to the road, feeling the weight of his presence behind me. After a few minutes, I tried again. "You heading home?" Silence. Then, in a low, hollow voice, he finally spoke. "Just going back." His voice sent a chill through me, but I forced a laugh. "Back where?" He didn't answer. The car felt too quiet. The engine hummed, the tires whispered against the asphalt, but everything else felt muted. Even the city lights in the distance seemed dimmer than before. I turned onto a long, empty road leading out of town. The trees lining it were tall and twisted, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching toward the car. The GPS said we still had 30 minutes to go. I adjusted my mirror again, just to check. That's when I noticed something that made my breath catch. The man's reflection in the mirror was wrong. It was delayed, like an old video with bad timing. When I blinked, his reflection blinked a second later. When I moved my hand slightly, the reflection didn't react at all. A wave of cold washed over me. I pressed down on the gas, suddenly eager to get this ride over with. I tried to stay calm. Maybe I was just imagining things. Maybe it was just a trick of the bad lighting. But then, he spoke again. "You drive this road often?" His voice was so quiet, almost like a whisper. "Not really," I admitted. "Don't get many pickups out here." He hummed, as if thinking, "Most don't." I gripped the wheel tighter. "You ever pick up someone who wasn't supposed to be there?" he asked. My stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" He shifted slightly in his seat. "Someone who called for a ride, but wasn't the one who got in?" A shiver ran down my spine. "And no," I said, forcing a laugh. "That'd be weird." He didn't reply. But then, I felt something cold press against the back of my seat. Something sharp. The GPS suddenly glitched, rerouting me. The new path led to a road I had never seen before, one that didn't even look paved. "Turn here," the man said. I swallowed hard. "That's not the way." "Turn here," he repeated, his voice lower this time. My hands felt clammy on the wheel. If I turned, I'd be driving into complete darkness, away from the main road. If I didn't, I wasn't sure what he'd do. My heart pounded. I had to think fast, I forced a chuckle, pretending not to be afraid. Sorry, man. Company policy. Gotta stick to GPS routes. For a second, silence. Then, I heard him shift again, closer this time. You should have turned. The words slithered through the air like a cold breath against my neck. The words slithered through the air like a cold breath against my neck. For a moment, my body refused to move. The way he said it wasn't a suggestion, it was a warning. Like I had made a mistake, like I had missed my only chance. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly they ached. My mouth was dry, and every part of my brain screamed at me to get out of there. But I forced myself to glance at the rearview mirror. He was leaning forward now, just inches away from my seat. His face was clearer in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. His skin was too pale, stretched unnaturally over sharp cheekbones. His lips curled into a subtle grin, but his eyes were wrong, dark, sunken, almost hollow. And yet, I could feel them staring right into me. I swallowed hard. I needed to stay calm. I forced a shaky laugh. Sorry, man. Just following GPS. The grin widened. But the GPS told you to turn, didn't it? I froze. I hadn't told him about the reroute. He shouldn't have known. I exhaled, trying to keep my voice steady. Look, I can drop you off at a safer location, maybe closer to the main road. He didn't answer. Instead, he slowly tilted his head, like a puppet with cut strings, and whispered, You should have turned. My body went cold. Something moved in the back seat. A faint, wet sound, like fabric shifting against something damp. I didn't look. I couldn't. I pressed the gas hard, speeding up. The road stretched ahead, dark and endless. The air inside the car had become thick, heavy, like something unseen was pressing down on me. And then, suddenly, the headlights flickered. For a split second, everything was pitch black. And in that split second, I felt something right next to my ear. A breath. Cold. Rotting. You should have turned, it whispered again. The lights flashed back on. I nearly lost control of the car. I didn't care about the speed limit anymore. I just needed to get to a populated area, anywhere with people. My hands were shaking as I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white. I checked the rearview mirror again. The back seat was empty. My chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. No, that wasn't possible. He had been there. He had been speaking to me just seconds ago. I forced myself to glance over my shoulder. Empty. But before relief could even settle, my phone screen glitched. The GPS rerouted again, but this time, the road it showed wasn't even on the map. A single phrase appeared at the bottom of the screen. Turn now. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I shook my head, whispering, no way. The road ahead was completely deserted, stretching into the dark. But as I looked closer, there was something standing in the middle of it. A figure, tall, still, waiting. The headlights barely reached it, but I could make out a familiar dark coat. It was him. I slammed the brakes. The tires screeched, and the car skidded to a stop just inches away from him. My breath came out in short, panicked bursts. He stood there, unmoving, his hands still deep in his coat pockets. His head tilted slightly to one side, as if he were studying me. Then, slowly, his lips stretched into a smile. Not a normal smile. Too wide, too sharp, too wrong. You should have turned, he whispered one last time. And then, he vanished. I sat there for what felt like hours, my body frozen, my hands shaking on the wheel. I forced myself to check the back seat again. Still empty. My phone was dead. The GPS screen was black. I started the car again with trembling hands and drove straight home, refusing to stop, refusing to even blink too long. When I got back, I locked my doors and collapsed onto the floor, breathing hard. I didn't go out the next night. or the night after that. A week later, curiosity got the best of me. I searched online for anything about that road. I found it. Years ago, it had been a major route, until a series of disappearances forced the city to block it off. Drivers who took that road at night were never seen again. Their cars were found abandoned miles away, doors open, engines still running. No one ever found the drivers. One of the last reports? A young man, last seen wearing a dark coat, heading home. He never made it. I quit my job shortly after. I don't drive at night anymore. But sometimes, even now, when I glance at my rearview mirror, I swear, for just a second, I see him there, sitting silently, waiting. And every time, I hear his whisper in my ear, "You should have turned."